turn this over to our keynote speaker, and how many of you have been to the TPAP program, Danny? I know there's more than that in our group. Okay, all right. So it's a great outcome.
Well, so is Bernard and John.
Yeah, right.
They're not having, but not.
Yeah. It's one of the things I didn't have enough time to go to, but I highly encourage you to be involved in that. Danny's really influenced agriculture. He's up there in the pantheon of influencers, encouragers, and leaders in agriculture. Danny and I first started working together coordinating financial statements in I think about 1983, and really he saw the light, got out of Illinois before things started collapsing, and he's really established himself in Texas A&M. So Danny's going to be telling us about the 12 things that 98% of the bag producers don't do. So it's definitely going to be a secret. So go ahead, Danny. Thank you for coming.
All right, let's see if this is loud enough for you, because I couldn't hear it. What I'm going to talk about are 12 best management practices. They are not the 12 best management practices. There's 12 things that I think the better producers do. I think even if you take the commercial producer, and my definition of a commercial producer is somebody that is farming and trying to earn a living on it. Not just it's a hobby or anything else, and I think it takes at least $500,000 a year to do that, and I think that's on the low end of gross sales. Things are interesting that within 10 years, even with this downturn we've been seeing, 1% of the producers in 10 years will produce half of all the output of U.S. agriculture, and 5% will produce 80%. And those are going to be the more business. I think in terms of secret or whatever else it is, one of the problems is farmers think there are secrets. There aren't. I mean, other than the unique nature of a contract that is legally and confidentially bound, anything you're doing, somebody else can do. Walmart always says, we don't care what you pick up with us or from what we do, we'll tell you. You can't get in their IT system, but other than that, anybody can see what we're doing. And we'll tell you. It's the issue of implementation and execution that you're not doing. Or prioritizing and putting time into important things. Let me give you, if I got this right direction. Last year I talked about one thing Gene talked about, peer groups. Because I think those are extremely important. The reason they don't work as well as they could is that farmers think, Don Jonovic said, most wholesale businesses are not closely held, they are hermetically sealed. Because by God, nobody's going to, you're going to do anything different than anybody else do it for the most part. Something like, you may be doing it better. And that's the important thing. Give you these just up front. These are standard things I start about every program I do with. So if you've heard me before, you're going to be real tired of these. It's the function of a competitive market is to drive the economic return of the average producer to break even. There's supply and demand responses in both the output and import markets. We go too far sometimes. We go over and we go under that. Alan Greenspan used to say it's rational exuberance and irrational, fear that drive us past what would be a norm. But if we truly have something here, an economic equilibrium, that means you're in an economic rate of return. But at that equilibrium, the good producers are still making money. Those average ones are just hanging in there, and the bottom ones are being flushed out of the system. While that may be cruel, it may be impersonal, that's the function of an economic market, to keep it to get more efficient. The big thing is that business success requires continuous improvement so that you stay in the front part of the pack. And that means, like Dan was talking about, he'd like to have somebody work beside you, but you may need to I'll say this. You got to try to work smarter, but not that Dan's stupid, because he isn't. But basically, we've got to start substituting technology for labor and other things. But other than finding some ways to take some mental breaks just so you don't burn out, you can never quit. The moment you think you've reached the summit and you slow down, it's like the torch in the air. Somebody will pass you. And the big thing is it isn't necessarily somebody in ag. Somebody will come in and do something different just because those people around you haven't been doing it. Okay, if I can get this thing separated, the next one is an economic reality that for your business to succeed and continue successfully beyond you. I'm talking about succession, transition, and other things. You have the management. And this involves the successor, not just the head person. You need to learn, adapt, and continuously improve at the rate set by the leading edge of your competition. Else you're falling behind. You can be moving ahead and falling behind. And I'll mention this in a minute, but let me just say it now and I'll skip it. You can have two guys on an interstate highway, both moving in the same direction. I tell undergrads this, so this may be boring to you. But years ago, when 70 was the speed limit on the interstates, Texas is now 75, 80, but I use 70. And the normal speed was 55. If you had two guys going 40 hours a week, the standard 8 to 5, an hour for lunch work week. At the end, if one was going 55, one was 70, they're both going the same direction, they're both making progress. At the end of 1 year, the guy going 70 will be 31,200 miles ahead of him. Just 40 hour week. He would have lacked him going around the world. The trouble is, the people I know who are going 70 and are doing that well say, what's this 40-hour week crap? I mean, there's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I don't have to do it all. And that's one of the problems with a lot of farmers. I got to do it, and I got to work harder. Delegate, hire, as was said over here earlier. Get somebody else to do the things they can do better than you can, and also to work more hours. Christian Hebert up in Saskatchewan says that it's cheaper for him to hire another $70,000 a year worker than just to buy another 80-foot drill. And he runs 24 hours a day. I think that's an important one. Now, if you have this guy that goes 70 that somehow figures out, this is the extreme, that goes 70 miles an hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, nobody does that. But then you have been to very big commercial dairies. They went 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I have a friend in North Dakota who farms in 12 states. So they keep his machinery moving, his labor force moving and working 9 or 10 months a year instead of the 3 months spring, 3 months fall, and it's kind of in between. The guy going 70 miles an hour, if he could do that, would be 498,800 miles ahead of the other guy going 55. In 1 year, 12 months. In other words, he would have lapped him going around the world 20 times. That's extreme, yes, but not very far from it. You can back off from that just a little bit. Double shifting, auto steer, different drops and things, and I think find a way to do a lot more than you think. You don't have to do it. It's the big thing. The manufacturers learn, and then other companies learn. I'm going to mention one thing before I do this. I said this about peer groups last year. And I think we ought to take it apart. Because they're just peer groups. Every one of them, and that includes me, exists in 4 states of knowledge at any one time. There are things that you know. There are things you know you don't know. That's right. If you know you don't know, you can find the answers to it. The third one is there are things that you don't know you don't know. That's all ignorance. Ignorance is way different than stupidity. It doesn't mean you're not smart enough, you're just not aware of it. And the last one, which is dangerous, and it permeates a lot of our political environment, is what you think you know that just ain't so. Okay, so that's, I think, one of the quotes. There's a guy named Breakthrough Company, a guy named Douglas Adams, said one thing one time, that human beings were almost unique in their ability to learn from the experiences of others, are also remarkable for their disinclination to do so. I mean, that's what peer groups are about. One of the reasons peer groups don't work is that people, I think they do work really well if they're good. But a lot of them fall short because people won't share. They think it's a secret, or they're ashamed of what they're doing, or whatever else it is. I mean, get some out your ideas on the table, get some alternative points of view, some feedback, some pushback, some suggestions of things you need to anticipate. Compare yourself. I mean, you may be the best out there in terms of total profitability. If you start drilling down into the data, you're going to find there's some areas you're not as good as somebody else doing. You need to be able to tweak that. Okay, here's some things about strategic management that I like to quote right off, and then I will actually get into my presentation. Strategic management is all about anticipating, adapting to, thriving, or creating, and capitalizing on change. Everybody hears the word strategic management and they think of SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's one little bitty piece of it. Strategic management is that ability to anticipate, adapt. And the guy that does it faster, because a lot of people move that direction, but they move after the leading edge is already taken there. Real successful producers are those that see the opportunities before they're obvious to the average producer, and they're always going to be one step ahead. Over time, enough time, that takes them out. Now, you've heard these before. Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player. Most of you probably not born when he was playing. But there's Gretzky up here, and there's other hockey players down here in terms of records. He said, people ask him all the time, why do you think it counted for your success? I was on a program with him out in Los Angeles. He said, I've been given this a serious amount of thought. He said, I think the biggest difference between me and other hockey players is they were always trying to go where the puck was. I was always trying to go where it was going to be. You look at a good linebacker, defensive back, a great rebounder, that's where they position themselves to be where it's going to be. Not just running like a bunch of fifth graders in a soccer match. You know, it looks like a herd of bees going out the field. There's always one that understands different. Jack Welch used to be chairman of the board of General Electric, CEO also, said the only truly sustainable competitive advantage in business is the ability to learn and adapt faster than your competition. That's why I use that 55, 70 mile an hour sort of thing. The idea is that no matter how well you're doing, it's impossible to be the best in every area. Somewhere, somehow, has a better way or idea than you do. Now, overall, you may be a top performer, but there's so many areas in business you need to drill down into. Okay, the last one is Tom Peters. I don't know if you've ever even heard of him. He wrote a book, he and Bob Barkley, called In Search of Excellence. About every 10 years, there's a symbol book, Good to Great, In Search of Excellence. He also wrote Thriving on Chaos. One of his statements, if you think it isn't broke, you haven't looked hard enough. There's something down there that could be made better. Okay, now I'm going to go into the things I actually was supposed to talk about. I'm going to look at 12 what I call best management practices, and they're not the best. coordinated revenue, cost, as Lori was saying, margin management, and managerial across the county, what you're here for. We got a long way to go. And we're getting better at it because of technology. I mean, I'll say a word that's, kind of the Antichrist or whatever. But service and granular are both moving that direction. We're starting to get real time down to the field level. And I think, just like there are different banks and farm credit and others, I think both of those have a chance to survive, and I think both of them can be successful. I think we need that kind of information to collect. We need to turn data. Farmers are big data collectors. They have it running out their ears. Into information, into knowledge. You've got to organize this that tell you something, and you have to learn from it in order to apply it. Now there's a lot of things that, apart from measuring margins and what your true costs are, and most people don't have a clue. They think they do. Or they know at whole farm, or they know at the enterprise, corn, soybean. You need to know not only at the whole farm, at the individual farms that make up your operation, and the enterprise, not just enterprise, but the enterprise on the specific operation, and better yet, at the field. At some point, we need to know within fields and what individual animals do. So I know, am I paying too much for rent? When's the trigger point to market? When should I be using options or futures, or a combination of puts and calls to bracket it? This is a time I can make money. Best example I can think of is a guy that probably doesn't fit most of your definitions. He's farmed several thousand acres in eastern South Dakota. He and a guy you probably do know, Ben Ritchie from Iowa. Ben happens to, in Jessup, is the University of Chicago MBA and was an investment banker. His brother was killed in an auto accident. His dad said, "You're going to farm and come back now." So he did, back in the, I think in the 80s, about the 90s. And they always say, "Well, don't you worry about giving up all that money to investment banker in Switzerland, New York, and Chicago." He said, "I've never made that little money farming." One of the things that they do is their marketing techniques. This one guy I'm thinking about has an operating entity. He's just one farm, but he has an operating entity. It hires all his hired men, it rents all his, even his own land. He rents at a market value to the operating entity. He sells his time to the operating entity. He has a leasing company that leases his equipment to the operating entity. The operating entity, so he knows the cost that flow through. He said, "I've already prepaid all my fertilizer, I've prepaid all my fuel, buy it seasonally because I've got storage." So the only thing I really don't know is probably chemical prices. And he said, "I'm a big enough customer, that if it is going to go up, I think my dealer will tell me, or give me some hint this is coming." What he does, he's in a part of the country where he has very uniform yields. Not one out of 5 years will his yield be more than 5 or 20% below his 5-year rolling average yield. Now that doesn't real tight, but one thing he does, he figures then, what would be my break-even price? What would cover all my costs at 80% of my expected yield? He says, if it carries on beyond harvest, then I'm going to add to that the storage or carrying cost, even if I'm storing my own bins. But he said, there has never been a year, I am a low-cost producer, and there has never been a year where there was enough fluctuation in the marketplace on one day that I couldn't pull the trigger and at least break even with 80% of my expected yield. He's got a standing order in Cargill. If it hits at one moment every day, boom, you price 80% of what I got. I may use options, something like that. If there's some sense it's going to go up, he puts it forward. A lot of people wouldn't take that risk just to do it, boom. And people in the audience, Apex, saying, well, how does that work? He said, one, I carry proper insurance. I've got 85%. I'm going to break even at that age. He said, and I've got another 20% of my crop. I've covered all my costs already on other than moving the stuff. This guy says he shoots for a 15% ROA. And he said at the time he was in Army, it had been 20 years and he hadn't missed it yet. Richie used the price averaging technique where he divides the year into segments. There's a few weeks he won't market. He calls it John Deere Day. He'll make payments around tax season and things like that. But he'll use a pricing technique. So it's kind of an average, price averaging technique. Both of them say, I never market high, but I'm always in the top third or top 25% of the average price. We asked the two of them what their average price of corn and beans have been for the last 10 years, and they were within a nickel. So that's one way to look at it. Second one is what if scenarios and sensitivity analysis. Basically, it's contingency planning. Not a lot of people do that. They do a little bit. They think what could happen, This is what could happen, and the most important part, to underline this 6 times, is and what would you do if it did? Farm credits, banks do what-if scenarios and shock tests all the time, but they don't completely answer what are we going to do if it happens. What's your strategy? It's like poker or anything else. It's not just your most likely, your best case, your worst case. This is looking, it's not taking the extremes, but it's looking over a little wider range of the bell curve in terms of what the combination. Because a lot of people think, well, if yields this, price this would do to me. Now, price this, yields it. There's combinations of those two. And you all look at it, some places actually assign probabilities. They don't have statistical probabilities, they use probabilities assigned by the individual members of the key management staff. And that hasn't turned out to be that much different than a statistical records. The 4 Ds. If you're in family business, we always talk about 4 Ds. And what's that? Divorce, departure, death, disability. That's from a family standpoint. What would happen if a key person, something like that happened? What's your backup plan? Do you have a succession plan? Like I said, none of this is too brilliant. It's just people don't do it. Okay. Think about this. What if you lost a lease? What if you lost a major contract? What if you, right now you better be thinking about this. What if your lender shut you off? What if you lost a key employee, your supplier or buyer, if you're concentrating on one? Remember those guys sold a Verisant in Minnesota? When they went bankrupt and the judge crammed down some of the contracts. Those are what-ifs. A disease like 71 leaf blight. Most of you don't, but it was a big thing. The drought we had in Illinois, I don't know, probably the other place in 2012. Fortunately, we had 85 billion crop revenue. We actually cash flowed better than we projected. We were doing. Monitoring and analysis. This is to monitor, to stay on top of what's going on. And a couple of things. One of them is clear. It's taking your budget, your actual cash flow, and comparing it to what's actually happening, what's your variance. But it's not just looking internal to the business, what's happening there. At the time you review it, think about the external environment. What has changed out there that you weren't thinking about or wasn't built into your assumptions at the time you started? You're an independent business. You're not a government. You can change your budget. can modify the business. You're not like, it's not like when the state legislature said we got this much and there's nothing we can do about it. You can, and you should. And I think at a minimum, a row crop farmer would be looking at monthly. Maybe an extensive cow calf operation could look at it quarterly, but if you're the CFO, you're the controller, you ought to be doing that. I have a group of friends that 3 of them, they weren't big farmers, they were 7,000 to 10,000 acres, good size, but not the megas. That hired a woman who'd been the controller for a group of 6 grain elevators. Now, she was making about $130,000 a year. Some of you, that's going to be high, some of it's going to be low. But this was a few years ago. She loved what she did, but she said, I'm working 60 hours, 70 hours a week, 60 most of the time. They said, grain handling, trucking, fertilizer sales, chemical sales, feed sales, storage. And so what they did, they went to her, they got to high school with her. She was CPA. And they said, look, we know your husband's president of the bank. You've got retired, you've got insurance. You're making $130,000 for 6 hours. What if we paid you $75,000? You work 30 hours a week, and you pick your hours. We will rent an office. We will hire a full-time data entry secretary combination. We'll get the software you feel is appropriate. Or they thought it was going to cost them $150,000 for a CPA, plus an data entry operator, plus the benefits and others. They were able to get out of the situation for $50,000 a year. They said it's the best thing they've ever done. You're talking about your outsourcing, and I think Norm does some of that too, with the controller sort of thing. This woman is doing what-if analysis for them. She's tracking vendors. She's tracking receivables. When they're doing a what-if, others, she does the analysis. They're all on the same accounting system, so they can do true benchmarking. They can test assumptions. They said it's the best money they ever spent. Analyzing the external factor and stuff, one of the things you're going to find, and I guess I've seen this in, first of all, I'm not running TPAC anymore. I did it for 25 years. I ran Apex for 20. I'm 68. I haven't gotten 60, but I...
Yeah, another 15 good years.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I celebrated our 50th this year. And one of the explanations for that, I was married a senior in high school. My wife and I celebrated our 50th anniversary in March. My oldest daughter was 50 in September. I had one primary objective in dating in high school. But I have a really good wife, so it turned out to be very well. We've got is time. The thing that separates the top 10% from the rest of the top 25%, not the top 25% is time. When you act, when you pull the trigger, when you get in, when you expand, when you expose, when you cut back, when you get out and reallocate resources. A lot of people think about it so darn long that the opportunities pass. Either the opportunity or the ability to fix a problem has passed you by. Time is what separates. That's not experience. That's not anything you can share with somebody else. For one thing, if you had a peer group of 10 people, say you're 20,000 acre producers, that's 200,000 acres, you're a drop in the bucket. I mean, if all of you got a whole lot better, you're not going to affect the corn market one darn bit. In 1990, 80% of the corn in the world's global export markets came from the United States. After ethanol and other things came along, by 2012, only 20%. Now, part of that's genetics, part of it's we got price so high that these guys said, hey, we ought to get into this too. And now they've got cheap resources. The only thing we got advantage is they got some really screwed up governments. And we're trying to match them there. the perspectives, analysis, taking multiple perspectives on things. This is the analysis can be done by a peer group, by management team, by an outside consultant, and other thing. Just get done set of eyes. What do they see that you don't see? It may just be one little thing. A friend named Harry Withers here. And they were very financials. He was higher on pharmacy. He's a dairyman. And so they started talking about it. He used the same product, the same protocols, everything else. Well, it turned out he was paying $16 a unit. They were paying $12. They all had the same supplier. Harry is the biggest dairyman in the group. All it took was one phone call. He is now getting $12 a unit. And he said, so was only $30,000. He said, $30,000 here, $50,000 there, $20,000, it adds up. Now he's a multi-million gross revenue operation. He's got 15,000 cows in 3 states. So this is not, when he talks about 30,000, it wasn't a big difference, but a whole lot of little differences make a big thing. You've all heard the story about the blind man and the elephant in India. Or if you blind, you walk up to an elephant, touch the side, you think it looks like a barn. If you touch the trunk, you think it looks like a piece of PVC pipe. You grab the tail, it must be a piece of rope. You grab the leg, you think it's an oak tree. If you took them all together, you might be able to describe an elephant. But most of you just see a piece through a set of blinders. One of the things by doing this, you can start looking at where your biases are, where you're wrong more often. So that's where your risk lies. And if you start tracking it and being honest with yourself, you'll recognize you're missing the mark here more often than you are at other places. That's where you either better information or risk management needs to play. In terms of analysis, you need to be able to treat causes, not symptoms. And to be able to do that, you need to drill down into the information enough that you figure out what is the true cause. We have so many people that treat symptoms. I mean, cancer, heart attack, and other things like that from a personal standpoint. We treat it long enough, and by the time we figure out the cancer metastasizes, so much black build up, when we have a heart attack, it's a big one. If you do something about it early, it either wouldn't happen or it could be kind of a non-event. There's in industry continuous improvement management, they talk about the 5 whys, WHYS. And what they're talking about is to get to the cause of the problem, you're probably going to have to ask yourself or others, why? 5 times. Because the first thing you're going to get, well, it's him, or something outside of our control. That wasn't my job. You need to keep drilling down to get past those excuses and get down to the true cause of the problem. One of the things I've learned and you've learned is that the best managers are intuitive and they're decisive. But they've also learned not to jump to conclusions. Because every complex problem has one solution that is simple, obvious, and what? Wrong. The simple answer is what the politicians used to. Or the big thing they do is we can put off the problem until the next administration is in place. I don't care if it's the governor, president, Congress. It's when it hits home, you blame that party, not the idiot that started it. All right. You've already gotten this one a lot. Accrual adjusted profitability and changes in earned and net worth is a big thing. Accrual adjusted profitability, we've had enough Farm Financial Standards Council that Paul was part of. I was back there when it started as Farm Financial Standards Task Force. And then stayed a little beyond that until I could keep up at Apex and other things completely. Didn't have as much time as I thought I would. But it was really important that got started. One of the things people that have been lucky in state for long enough will tell you that cash-based income can lag accrual basis by 2 to 3 years in spotting problems are developing or that the thing has turned around and started up. If timing is a big issue, 2 to 3 years is way too late to discover those things. And a lot of times you mask it, we sell off inventory, you don't replace equipment as often as we used to, we cut back on a few things, so we can keep cash flowing for a while. Or if you start growing, you're saving back corn, you're saving back hogs and stuff like that to grow. Your expenses look pretty high, you're not as big sales, but actually your business turned around. That's one reason. It's really very easy. Cash to accrual adjustment. If you've got balance sheets at the beginning and the end of the period for which you measure income, and the accrued items, the inventories, the payables, the receivables, the prepaids, and so forth on your balance sheet, you don't need to be a genius to figure out what it is. Now, if you do it within the year, you can shorten those time frames. But you don't want to be that late in figuring out that there's a problem. Also looking at earned net worth. There's two things. It's taking accrual adjusted net income, less taxes, and if you're a proprietorship rather than a corporation, unless you withdrawals to the business, is the reason you're not doing so well, you're making money in the business, but you're subsidizing your children, whatever else it happens to be. You're looking at, if I'm looking at people, I was in the farm credit system. I went to Texas A&M. I'd been a commercial banker for 5 years, went got my doctorate, went back to A&M. And by 1982, the farm financial crisis hit. They wiped out one of the major teams from the farm credit banks. I left A&M. I went to the farm credit system from 1982 to 1987, which was an interesting time. I learned a lot. Then I went back to A&M because all of a sudden, when the problem started kind of, this is kind of bottomed out. It started to turn around. We weren't doing much with kind of education and that they were worried about merging association stuff. It wasn't really exciting. I had calls from about 4 universities in 3 months. They wanted 2 things. They wanted something by about a PhD. You got to have your union card if you're in freshman Howard now. And you also, they want somebody who'd been a lender. So that you'd actually seen that. The trouble is, I'm extension and teaching research, but like most of extension, they did that in 1987. That's after the horse is out the barn door. They weren't using cash for scroll account, they were using politics to decide when we needed to do it. So, excuse me, they had their heads up their ass. That's not atypical. When I started TPAC, Howard, some of my advisory committee, had about 10 big farmers and 10 academics together. I went out and visited the executive programs at the FBS School at Duke, at Stanford, at the Kellogg School, just to gather information. Case IH gave me their top prospect list. I surveyed those. Some of you may have been in. What would you pay? How important would it be to have a program like this? We were non-commodity specific. It was business. We wanted to spend enough time on a topic to delve into it some. And the other is we didn't want it to be state-based. I wanted to go around the nation, just the mix of people that were going to be there. We had Canada, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Chile, New Zealand. We even had one from Mozambique so far. And we have 18 faculty. 17 of them aren't from Texas A&M. They're either private sector, or they're like Mike Olgey, or Neil Harrell, or Dave Cole, somebody like that. They're outside. Just, you want to get good people in there. We've also designed the program, I don't need to be selling this because I'm not even running it. where we had discussion groups, round tables. We had happy hour, basically, I can't remember what we call the room, where after 9 o'clock you go up there and drink and talk and everything. Where did you do this? Did you? Burn. You weren't in charge of the hospitality, were you? He is a maker's mark man. That's just by necessity. He doesn't really like this stuff. It's just because. Anyway, a lot of discussion with the breaks and meals together and other things like that. We've had these small discussion groups that go into rooms. If you had a topic you want to talk to anybody else about, collaborative farming, sharing machinery, incentive systems, what kind of managerial accounting should you have, how do you pay family members and other things like that. You just listen on a bulletin board the time and the place, so somebody wanted to do something else but see, no, that was going on, I shouldn't do it then. And then whoever's interested shows up, and they talk about this. So one year we had prenuptial agreements. We had 8 people show up, 2 son-in-laws and 8 daughters. There's no faculty member in there, it's just talking about the issues. Those sort of things, I think, need to be done. Autopsies. Now, some people call these debriefings. I got this from a guy who used to be the lead pilot from the Blue Angels. And he said, after every performance, they sit down and they have a brutal debriefing. He said, we can't, with 2 $30 million jets and a pilot going 600 miles an hour each, we can't afford to be making mistakes. So we got to take it apart and fix those under again. I don't care what your ego is, you get over that pretty quick. This is the sort of thing. I started this off with loan officers and farm credit on sales and problem loans, where I bring them together if they hadn't been able to get through their customer or they had a problem loan, get the group together. They had a problem loan. It wasn't, don't sweep it under the rug. That's a problem. That's a real problem. Get it out, what would other people do, what the others been through, what you learn from it, other things. Now, here it's whether things are going well or poorly. It's why did things turn out like they did? Were there things you overlooked? Were there mid-course adjustments that could have been made? Did some of the assumptions you made going into this plan, were they wrong? Were there external factors involved that you didn't see or other things or filter out? Or was there more detailed information that you find you needed to make those decisions better? More timely decisions. Conservative Center is real-time information to make some of those decisions. And that's coming at the speed that will kind of blow you away. And a lot of producers, I've said in a couple articles, I think more people, there's times right now, if you got too high a cash rents, locked in too far, you may be in trouble. There's going to be a lot of farmers that are only kind of average farmers that have inherited or slowly, pretty conservatively built up their own land for 1,500 acres. Just they can live off the opportunity cost of cash rent for years. They're not paying somebody else. But they can survive. Still, over time, consolidations will continue to happen. And this being able to be on the leading edge of the things, that technology, I think a lot of producers are going to go by the wayside and look over the next 10 years or not be followed by a successor. More because of management obsolescence. They're really, maybe really good producers or something else, but the finance, the regulations, food safety, environmental regulations, the new technology that's coming along, that detailed information, managing people, delegating, holding them accountable. People that can't do that and think, well, that's not possible. I've been trying, but I'm doing it the same way my dad did it. The most dangerous phrase in business is, well, we've always done it that way. You are in trouble. Because one of the things that top producers No, because they hear somebody, well, we're doing it that way because we've always done it that way, they have a competitive advantage. Okay, so on autopsies, you're looking at things basically, what do I need to do differently next time? What did I learn from this experience? It's a great place to learn successors, the key management team is. So you can get them transparency with information, talk about how things are going. To get the successor developed into those discussions and the strategic decisions that need to be made. What you want to do, you're never going to eliminate success or problems, but you want to try to get to the point where you're repeating successes more often and eliminating mistakes. You're not going to miss them all. There'll be something new that comes along, but you want to start fine-tuning that getting done. Last one up here is benchmarking. There's a lot of ways to do that. FBS, some banks, some accounting firms have this. There are even some firms that are putting this together on their own. So you prepare yourself. Peer groups are really good ways to do this. If you agree on how information should be collected and presented, instead of every one of you doing something in some different way. It's a big thing, I think, to work on. It can make you a lot better at what you're doing. The 80-20 rule. This thing comes from what's called the Pareto principle. You all know this. It's, as, what was the guy's name? I was trying to think. Stephen Covey. He's 7 highly effective people. Do first things first. What it says is that 20% of what you do accounts for 80% of your results. When you figure those out, it'll be different for everybody. Outsource, delegate, stop doing some of that stuff. Whatever it is, don't just try to do it all. That's one of the ways the bigger and the better managed companies have. They have expertise and specialization in management to get that. Somebody handling risk management. Somebody doing the cost accounting. I have a friend that's a potato farmer in Gulf States. He has a CFO, a comptroller, an IT director they hired from Microsoft, which is put an ERP system in place. He has 2 directors of marketing, one that markets directly to one of the major companies on chip potatoes, one that markets to the fresh potatoes to Walmart and to Lamb Weston for French fry potatoes, sweet potato French fries, one that markets table stock potatoes. He's got a chief engineer, he has a chief agronomist, a chief operating officer, a human resources director in a big building, and they monitor all this. The radio frequency towers and infrared scanners and soil tensiometers and humidity gauges, temperature gauges, wind speed directions on every set of equipment they have across the United States. They can read in that one office. And they can turn them off or on. I can do any time intervention. I can put spray in specific spots or fertilize if I need to. Start putting water on. But usually there's an on-site agronomist. There's a lot of overhead built into this. But you spread it over a lot, the extra specialization in management. They really work with communications. That's a big thing, as you said in the back, about spreading out over areas. That's one reason they want the ERP system. They want to eliminate those, everybody having their own spreadsheets. Bill Gates, about 10 years ago, said, he talked about what information company. He said, we're generating 300 some reports on spreadsheets and others. They went down and got down to it, and they generated about 18,000. I had a son-in-law worked for Dynegy at a time he came out of college. And there were 8 guys in this group taking information from different spreadsheets and putting them in different. And Shane's answer was, have these idiots never heard of macros? So he stayed in over the weekend, wrote some, gave it to his boss, who gave it to the IT person. 2 weeks later, they eliminated 68 people. Now, Dynegy was picking up. Shane was on one. He was bored to death doing what he's doing. He went to energy trade. These people had a place to go. But they saved about $60,000 a year on 6 people. $360,000 a year plus benefits. Well, 2 weeks later, his paycheck, you got a $25,000 bonus. Now, it wasn't anywhere near what saved the company, but it was big enough to mean something to Shane in 2002. And he was looking for something all the time. Okay, so the thing here is figuring out what those most important things are. The trouble is, most people do what they know how to do, what they like to do, what's easiest for them to do, what they can get started and complete in the shortest amount of time, or what's urgent. And if you let those dominate you, you will never have time to get to these. You need to figure out what those things are and what needs to be done and give these others to somebody else. Okay, it's not just about setting priorities. It's prioritizing your priorities. I can list 30 things that are important. But if I believe I have only time to do 10, I need to pick those most important 10 and put them in. And that's where you put most of my time. I may need to be available for people to talk to me or manage a meeting service responsible for those areas reporting in. Most people's long-term objectives are never completed because they do second things first. They do those things that are urgent or I like to do or need to do, other things. And they don't do those things. You'll never get to where you want to go if you're always being deferred to doing second things. The 5% rule comes off of a study I did when it came out of Farm Credit. I noticed from 82 to 87, and the hard farm financial crisis. Net worths may have been going down for some guys. The land values fell in half on a market basis. But there were people that never lost money. And I thought, why? And so I got one of the big consolidated farm credit banks to give me data on producers, no names, over 6 years, 82 to 87. Now, first of all, you had to be in that pool from 82 to 87. The real problems weren't there. What I was doing, I was taking the top 25%, the average for the group, and the bottom 25%. And comparing those. My measure of success was increase in earned net worth, determine which pile you ended up in. I also broke it into 6 farm types: cow-calf, finished hogs, dairy, corn, soybeans, cotton, grain, sorghum or milo, and wheat. So I was comparing people of similar type operations. It wasn't like, well, this year corn is profitable, this year isn't. In those groups. And when I started analyzing, I looked at things like production per unit per acre, per cow. I looked at price per unit sold. I looked at cost per unit sold. I looked for asset turnover ratio. Were they doing a more efficient job of utilizing assets? What I got down to in all these enterprises over 6 years is the top 25% were about, in all its key areas, were about 5% better than average. The bottom 25% about 5% below it. Now the reality is the range was 3.6 to 7.2%. Not as big as you think. But they did it over and over again. And if you look at the cumulative, just adding up, if you look at the multiplicative effects, if I get 5% higher yields and I get 5% higher price, then it doubles up. There's a compounding effect to it. That's when you earn net worth and it's earning at a certain rate at the end. You can't believe that Dave Cole looked at the Finman data out of Minnesota. And I think this was in 2012. The top 20% of producers averaged $844,000 net income. The bottom 20% averaged $14,000. These guys are saying, these aren't big farms in Minnesota. You may be from there, but I mean, they may have had 5,000 acre operations. They may have had 1,000 acres. And those went big to you. They're not Riverview with 75,000 cows. They're not somebody with 40,000 acres. This is in kind of the way. They also don't have to be little ones. It would be 1,000, 5,000 acres. Even in that range, they were getting that kind of differences. My baseball analogy all the time, and a lot of you have heard this, is if you took a Major League Baseball player with a lifetime batting average of 300, what's his income? About $15 million, and if he keeps that up, he's a third career, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. What's it? The average baseball player in Major League Baseball had starting position about $250. What's he making? He's struggling to get by on $1 million, $1.5 million. Now he's got about 10 years life expectancy to do that. If he invests wisely, he'll be in good shape. That's a big thing. But still, he gets the local Chevrolet dealership ads. He didn't get the Nike or anything. One's going to be in the Hall of Fame. One's going to get 15 times as much money. You put those two guys up at that 20 times. How many more hits does the 300 hitter get than the 250? One. He gets 6, the other guy gets 5. One time out of 20, but he does it over and over and over again. That's when it's the little things just being done consistently. You say, it's a problem. Look at some things you know. Analyzing what to stop doing. In the book Good to Great, Jim Collins wrote that the very best companies spend as much time analyzing what they need to stop doing what they're doing as they do evaluate new opportunities. There's as much to gain to quit doing some of the stuff that we've been doing forever. We've been doing it that way. You know, that's resource, enterprise, time, capital, people, whatever. What's the old saying? And came after in that book, it came into what the world's best managers, break all the rules what the world's best managers do differently. It's get the right people on the bus, get the right seats, and the wrong people off the bus. And the people side. It's looking at the process, developing, mapping processes, developing standard operating procedures to reduce the variability, to get consistency, and also to develop an incentive system which keeps employees trying to make those better. If you put SOPs in place, you'll get better. And then you'll be like a labor union or a government agency or a university, and you will plateau. Well, that's out of the norm. We don't do that. We keep going down this little path. This one says, use a partial budget approach, which says, if we do something, there's areas that increases revenue. There's areas that decrease expenses in. There's other areas that increase expense in, other areas that decrease revenue in. Not just in that thing. Don't just look there. How does it affect the whole business? And if you look at the net effect, and you can find a gain, a net gain in revenue or a net reduction in expenses to the net income difference, then adopt it and pay the guy that's man or woman an incentive for coming up with the idea. You keep them engaged. Keep team rules and things. We actually are going to finish up on the E-Myth principle. Can you ever read the book, The E-Myth Principle? Okay. One thing Gerber says is every business has 4 constituencies. You have buyers, what you produce business services. You have suppliers, you have employees, and you have funding sources, whether it's a lender or investor. All of you got those. What you need to do is some research. Hire a journalist or something, go out and just talk to people and pay them to ask not just people that do business with you, but people that do business with businesses like yours and say, what are your 5 biggest frustrations in dealing with a grain elevator, in dealing with a tenant farmer, in dealing with a bank? If you can eliminate 2 or 3 of those biggest frustrations, you become the employer of choice, the tenant of choice, borrower of choice, the supplier of choice. I mean, if you look at these models and some, I'll take Frito-Lay. 20 years ago, they had 1,000 growers. Today, they have 70. And what they did, they culled. Somebody doesn't perform, they take away from it. Who do they give it to? They don't go out and find another farmer. They give it to the best of who they have. If somebody quits, they do that. If they move in a new area, need a new producer, they offer it to the best of who they have. This guy provides alignment, he provides quantity, he provides uniform quality, the traceability, all those other things. And so and it's cheaper to get it from fewer people. You don't want one supplier, that steals the negotiation a little bit. But it's something you ought to think about. Not a lot of people do it. The other one is open communication. People have mentioned this here. Peer groups, others, Johnny, when you're doing these family business meetings and other things, the biggest problem is the lack of open, transparent communication. We say that over and over again. I try, but I do it the same stupid way I've always done it. I keep this stuff to myself, or I just tell him he's supposed to do what I tell him. Peter Drucker, who is the father of modern management, says 60% of all management problems are the result of poor or lack of communication. Mark Goldwyn, who wrote the book Exit Right, says 60% of all transactions fail because of conflict within the family or poor communications. Get it out there. Talk about it. Other things. I'm going to see if I can find one thing I had here that I want to mention to you. When I'm talking about that, this is where I was going to quote John Beck, who said most wholesale businesses are not closely held, they are hermetically sealed. Okay. The objective is if you want to get buy-in and clear communications and a shared vision, a sense of ownership, they where's the business headed? How does it plan to get there? What's my role going to be in this new thing? What's in it for me? Selfish? Yeah, let's read. The other one is even employees and family members want to know, what exactly is it I'm expected to do? Well, watch and learn. The other one, a lot of dads don't like, grandfathers don't like, even with the dads. Is why am I doing it? Because I told you so. If you don't have a good reason why you should be doing it this way, maybe you shouldn't be doing it that way. How are they doing? People give constant feedback. You have a set of metrics that you judge based off the job description or job responsibilities. Are you telling them regularly? Do they have a scoreboard or something that they can determine, am I on track? Am I doing well or not? Or do I just have to guess? James Bennett, this executive VP I worked in for the Farm Credit Bank, said how his employees knew how they were doing was he'd say, attaboy, or, oh, shit. He said it took 5 attaboys to upset 1, oh, shit. It went to pile his desk. And that's how they determined how well they were doing. The other thing is, how can I improve? If you've got a good employee, he or she wants to get better. Whether it's to make your business better, or I don't even care if they want to get better so they're more employable somewhere else. The best football coaches in the country continuously lose assistant coaches because people want to clone that head. If you pick people right, develop them right, so what? One thing that you got to remember is that a leader can't get his message across or hers clearly enough and get people to act on it than having a message that'll make a difference. You can blow hot air for all you want. But if you can't get people to understand it and act on it. You're just blowing hot air. Okay. Last one is to talk about strategic alliances, pooling arrangements, and alternative business model. Okay, a couple things to make you think about this. It's to capture economies of scale. It's to reduce cost, to improve asset utilization. It's to access greater technical expertise. It's to obtain access to certain markets you couldn't do on your own. United Food Service and Purchasing Co-op. You know who they are? They're Louisville, Kentucky. They're a closed co-op owned by the Burger King franchisees, which includes KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, A&W Root Beer, things of those companies. I don't know how many years ago this was, 2 or 3, so or you may know better what the examples are now. But at that time they had about 225 employees and over $6 billion worth of business. They were the supplying, they negotiated contracts, they developed relationships. They could buy in volume, get distributed properly. They got those economies of scale and the expertise in the risk management area and other thing. Upside down. Just some things I'm thinking of. One of the things you're going to have to understand, and you may not like it, it's going to give you an advantage, is to be successful, a lot of producers are going to realize they're going to have to become more interdependent than they are independent. I tell Texans all the time, your greatest strengths, your greatest weakness is your independence. Because we will do something just because somebody says you should. Well, other times, just because somebody says you should, even it's a good idea, we won't do it. Nobody's going to tell us what to do. So, and being in the cattle business, I would say this is literally the cow-calf operations, the old cowboy standard way of doing things than it is in farming. But by golly, we're independent. Okay, there's a lot of things you can do to achieve those economies of scale. And two of them I don't have here. It would be like CFO accounting services, those where they go together, outsource or hire to join the service bureau. Risk management, Donald DeYoung, who's a huge dairy, also does risk management on grain purchasing and other things for about 250,000 cows and other birds. In purchasing contract, you can pool buy, pool sell. Chris Barrett, Rob Reddy, select milk producers, the Cayuga marketing group. They go together and take their market power, they get better deals. Maybe it's buying seed corn, maybe it's buying chemicals. And it's good for the company too. I only have to deliver one place. I sell a whole lot of units. These guys just come and pick up from the central delivery spot where you're going to get it. Exporting and importing. I know a firm in California that formed a marketing co-op close to Seattle for firms. And hired a guy that knows a specific brand, has lots of contacts, and gets contracts, puts it back in the name. They have the right of first refusal to take contracts. If they don't want to, the manager of operation goes and gets somebody else to produce. Product services, advertising. One of the things I'm thinking about doing, a very simple case. The guys up in Northeast Texas have a whole lot of hunting. It's a big thing. Turkeys, fishing, deer, whatever else. Well, they can. But they went in Dallas Magazine, Houston Magazine, and New York and stuff. What they did is form a co-op. So they could afford that, put that advertising out there. It comes back to the clearinghouse and is allocated out to those growers. High dollar. You pay a lot of money for it. That rodent that's out there eating your bushes is worth about $5,000. processing plant, fuel, grain storage, other things like that, river condos, fertilizer, joint grain storage. There's some dairies in Southern California. 5 of them went together to build a grain milling or feed milling plant so they could bring unit cars into. And so trucking it down there, they got a lot cheaper prices on it. Repair shops going together in the winter and stuff, having a maybe fully stocks. We move stuff so we keep renovating, reinvigorating machinery, keep the shop full. And also have some people on call that we break down the last one. We can get them on the bed and they can be there. Self-insurance, one thing we've talked about Apex the last couple of years, captive insurance. It's for a lot of reasons. But if we're getting this point where anybody with over 750,000 adjusted gross revenue loses their subsidy on the federal crop insurance, they're going to be these captive insurance companies popping up like crazy with several top producers around the country. That'll do 2 things. Get them cheaper insurance, if there's money to be moved down to the gas, they'll have the insurance center. But the other thing is going to be that the pool with the guys left in this damn crop insurance is going to be lots higher risk than the one up. Dennis Daggett used to run John Deere's crop insurance program, said 50% of losses are due to management. If you take nothing but the best managers and put them in that pool, and what's left over is down here, the costs are going to change. Genetics, machine and equipment sharing, giving you resource management services like this company Donald runs. The H2A, the record keeping, the recruitment, payroll, and stuff like that is centralized. The other 2 things I've seen a big thing, and I think more we ought to consider it, means you're going to have to work out kinks and emerging cultures and attitudes and your own way. I do things this way. Our collaborative economy, like Chris Barrett, the Funding Group in Iowa, Rob Reddick, what's Future Vision, Ag Vision, and there are others. Where there have been 4 or 5 farmers go together, now they're having others come in and they form a jointly owned merged operating entity, but by bigger equipment, and people do what they're best at doing, and farmer does a group. They have somebody that handles marketing, the marketers group. They buy as a group. Just so, without being great big, which they might like to be, but they can't. So they may be 1,500, 4,000 acre farms, but they operate like a 20,000 acre farm. Chris says he's getting 20% discounts on the cost of his inputs. You can do managerial cost accounting, do it very well because you can afford to hire somebody that has a skill set. Mergers. JD with Keiko Isom and A&M put on a mergers and acquisitions workshop out of Kansas City. And there are 2 reasons to think about this. Most of you think about it from the standpoint of things that are really bad for a lot of farmers. I may be able to merge in or acquire a whole bunch of other assets. The other thing may be if you're in a position where you're stressed, other things, why not rather than farm until it's all gone? Think about merging with a bigger operation that has more specific specialized management, economies of scale, and things like that. And you become a minority owner. You're going to move, unless you're exceptional, to probably a mid-management position. You're going to keep your key employees. You aren't going to lose after you all your life. Your son is going to have a place to work after you've gone by merging in with somebody. Because over time, a lot of this mergers happening anyway. It's just happening by somebody goes out of business or quits farming and gets acquired into one of these. But there are reasons to do it. The farm credit system. For years, the reason they merged associations and banks is because somebody was in trouble, the president was retired. They're happening a lot more often now for proactive reasons. Because it makes good businesses. Lori's husband, Steve, is on the board of Farm Credit Services in America, which is now joint managing with one in Kansas. And if they aren't the biggest, they're either the biggest or second biggest farm credit association in the United States. Iowa, Nebraska, but South Dakota and Wyoming and now Kansas. I will tell a story. Steve Thomas, this our managerial workshop. He said, "This took us how many years, John, to get this fully implemented?" He said, "I love my wife, but this is as close as we ever came to divorce." So it's not just something you snap your fingers and it's in place. It's a labor. If you can make it a labor of love, so much the better. But it's work. Those are really the things I want to talk about. I talked last time about peer groups. And I think those are extremely important. But I think they're a way to challenge you. But you've got to trust and you've got to be open. Maybe you don't want to populate with neighbors that you're going to be competing for rent your ground. But I don't even think it's important that they be in the same commodity. You're all cornered by Bob. It's business. Now, it makes it hard to benchmark some numbers against each other. I think it is important to benchmark. And if you got a group of peer groups, like Jim and the TPN, you can ultimately start building a big database and sharing information across where if I come with a problem in this peer group, no one here has dealt with that. Let's go through our facilitator network and find somebody else that is and bring them in and talk about it. I think it's a way to challenge yourself to keep getting better. If you think you have all the answers in your management team, you're a little mistaken. There's a lot of great big public firms where their CEO is part of a peer advisory. And a lot of YPO, Young Presidents Organization, Vistage, Korea in Argentina, where there are 220 groups that started 50 years ago, and they're still going. I don't know what it is about our independent. I do, but I guess let all those little independents stand by the wayside. I don't mean to be impersonal about this. Get better at what you're doing, you'll own it before too long. I don't mean to be dissing them, other than I think if they aren't going to get better, that's the reason the competitive economic system exists. How it gets more efficient. It weeds out those that keep doing the way we've always done. Okay, if there's any questions, otherwise you've heard from me a lot of questions, from me a lot of times people.
Any quick questions for Danny?
Yeah.
You mentioned the accumulation of data, but I did not hear you mention data analytics and the use of big data in the process.
Yeah, well, the point is farmers collect data. You have to transform it into information, organized in some way, and they have to transfer it to knowledge. Data analytics and other sort of means are how you start taking that information down into a useful tool. Yeah, it takes all you're doing is collecting data. You're just wasting a lot of time.
The process, though, of applying data analytics to agricultural data is, well, what do you see coming in that regard? Is it going to be individually? Is it going to be?
It will be both ways. There'll be some groups that come together and do it. More people on a fee basis, and some that do it together. Some through a peer group may do it. Some bigger operations may do it on their own. But no, the technology is ramping up exponentially. So in real time, we can be pulling together all these from your inventories to your production to your marketing, your cost of inputs, the conditions of the field, to bring it all together and develop the appropriate metric. Right first, you're going to be doing too many. That's like they do on loan analysis. We've got 50 ratios we can calculate. So this business, what what's important is, one, having good information. The second, probably about 20 of those are really important for this business. You got to decide what those are. And you're going to start with too big and narrow down to the ones that really either tell you something or help you forecast and make a better decision. You know, if I didn't say that, I would that it's data first in the information, then some analytical tool turn it into knowledge. It's critical. It's a waste of time. We did go to sleep. That's a good thing. I'm doing a program in Memphis, and I think I told you this early on. Mike told you I was going to do it. He had a conflict. I said, well, you know, I'm a lot cheaper than Mike. Because I'm not as energetic and I don't have less knowledge. But the good thing I've had on PPAP is I've seen a whole bunch of really good. There's some good people. They're just basically good people. But there were some that are exceptions. If you listen to those, I'm on 8 boards, 2 corporate boards and 6 advisory boards. And that's been a lesson too, like John, when you get what play over with the senior management team. And one of my jobs is always I have to call everybody, not everybody, some of them have 300 or 400 employees, but, you know, here we'll use different lists every year. Talk to these 40, set up a time, tell them what you want. You have the questions kind of assimilated. And a lot of the advisory boards I'm on, I am called the reactor. It's one because the last trip, I remember Craig Howard when we were meeting Frito Lay. Said, they go, oh my God. But it turned out well. It was, why don't you finance these guys? This is back when interest rates were 8 and 10%. I said, you get money in the commercial paper market. You have information, all these guys you deal with for 20 years, they're providing your costs. If you're out on the, you don't have to market to them at all. You don't have to meet regs. The banks do. You know, deal with little bitty checking accounts or everything that you deal with is going to be a multi-million-dollar operation. I said, why don't you provide company store financing? You get commercial paper, mark it up a percent, so you make money. It's going to be 2% cheaper than they're getting it somewhere else. And you have one real advantage over it. You control the source of repayment. That hasn't happened yet. Frito-Lay's CFO was a little nervous about it. If we start crunching down on these qualified suppliers, those big markets that they want to take care of, we like these. There's going to be some alternatives developed to standard lenders, besides equity capital from the outside and stuff. This is a select group of coordinated supply chain qualified suppliers, just making sure they're keeping alive and keeping the supply coming. The alignment's important. Alignment's timing, place, and quality. What are you doing to becoming a qualified supplier? And if you can offer those things, differentiate yourself. And when you go out of your way to accommodate a lead in the supply chain, like, well, now we're busy, we don't, you know, that means people are not working the weekend. And they'll say, well, that's fine, we're supposed to find somebody that does, but next time it's contract up, they'll get what you want. Okay? One time. Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay.
Thank you, Danny. And this afternoon, we'll be taking off number 6, number 1, number 4, and number 12, and hopefully can touch on all 12 of these items during the next couple of days.